started. Good afternoon. My name is Helen Hall, and I'm the host of today's webinar. I want to welcome you to the second in a series of webinars that IEEE USA will offer this year. Please continue to check our website for more webinars. And I want to go over just a few house rules before I introduce our moderator. To ask a quick question during the session, please use chat to send a private message to the host, moi. And also, please hold longer questions for the end of today's session. And also mute your phone lines by pressing *6 or just press your mute button. And about our moderator, Sherry Edwards, the Resource Maximizers Principal, offers coaching for individuals pursuing a career change or downsizing, merger, or returning from an extended absence of work. In addition to providing one-on-one counseling, Sherry conducts job search and strategic networking workshops for small groups and outplacement classes for private employers. And to find out more about Sherry, you can go to our website and click on the link, and there's more information there. And without further ado, Sherry, you're on.
Thank you, Helen. How is everybody today? I'm Sherry Edwards. I'm a career coach, consultant, and trainer from Seattle, Washington. I work with people all over the United States to help them develop strategies for getting reemployed or developing their careers. During today's presentation, I'm going to be asking questions throughout, and I'd ask you, if you would please, to either respond by raising your hand, as I request, or by simply using the chat box. And as Helen indicated, you're welcome to send brief questions to me, but I'd like to save some of the longer ones for the end of the presentation, and they certainly can be open to everyone if you choose. I'm going to suggest that today's webinar is information that is not rocket science. It's information you already know and probably use every day in your professional life. Today we're presenting it again as a reminder that you already have these tools. You just seem to remember to you just need to remember to use them. So today what we're going to cover are some basic premises about the job market, some basic ideas that will seem pretty familiar to you. We'll discuss effective job search processes, and we will expose the myths related to job search. We'll talk about behaviors that will ensure your success. We'll also discuss and explore why some people seem lucky. We'll talk about strategies for building your confidence and talk about what employers really are looking for. So let's get started. The first part of this, as I said, it's not rocket science, but if you're not happy with the results you're getting, then clearly something needs to change. So I hope you start with an open mind and recognize that although you may have heard many of the things we're about to present, there are things that really have to be adopted to make a difference. So off we go. I'm going to present a thought to you, and that is, securing your next position is exactly like winning any other game. My guess is that many of you have played sports or games. If that's true, please raise your hand. Okay? We've got at least a half a dozen folks, 10, 12, 14 people that have indicated they've played a sport or a game. Okay, then the quiz would be, what are you ready to get started today? Yay, okay. Then let me ask you all. I'll have you put your hands down, and I'll ask you to answer in the chat area. What is the most important thing to know before you get started playing any sport or game? Let's see what you have to say. Okay, is everyone familiar with the chat area? Okay. Is everyone, let me ask this. If you want to unmute your phone, I think it's fine if you go ahead and answer verbally. Otherwise, if you have an answer, what's the most important thing to know before you get started or play any sport or game?
The rules.
The rules, absolutely. And I think that may seem too obvious for some folks. We don't want to overthink this, but the reality is unless we know exactly what we're going after and how it has to get done, we can't get started. So in this game, the rules are being aware of current market conditions. In other words, what is exactly going on in the market based on the economy right now? And many of us are very familiar with, it's changing day by day. Some indicate that it is getting worse, but it's something that does change on a daily basis, and we need to be aware of it. We need to research industry standards. Industry standards are now changing because we're in a time of recession. What may have been true for some occupations, some industries a year ago, are dramatically different than they are today. We also need to be aware of current salary ranges for our geographic area, and that's another element that changes significantly day by day. As the cost of living changes, as the market floods, our salaries are impacted, and it's important to recognize that what you may have earned last year or even 5 months ago may be different in today's market. So what does it really take to win? And we're going to talk about the basic steps to get started, and then we're going to address your mindset. So to start forward, winning is the science of being totally prepared. The greatest element in winning anything is being prepared for what you're going to encounter. Athletes do it by getting in shape, working out. For those of us that are dealing with a mental challenge, we still need that type of preparation. We need to identify what our strengths and weaknesses are. Again, I'm going to use the analogy of playing a sport. Before we get into the sport, we need to know what the rules are. In order to play well, we need to know what we're strong at and what our weaknesses are. Conversely, we need to know our competition. We need to know exactly who's out there so we have a good frame of reference of what we need to work on. Then based on that information, our strengths and the competition's strengths and weaknesses, we put together a strategy. It's very unlikely that anyone's going to be running out on a basketball court without a plan. So we need to follow the same thinking and develop a strategy to work with our strengths and weaknesses. With that, we put together a plan. And that would be a detailed approach to exactly what we need to do every day. The next element that we need to factor into this is working our plan. And I think many people fall off the mark here, excuse me, in that their plan has holes in it or they randomly approach it. It's really important to stick with the plan that you develop. The next part of this is we practice what we're talking about. And if I can get some input from you, what kinds of things do you think you would practice as it relates to your job search? Does anybody have any ideas? You can enter into the chat room. Okay, I'm not sure. Let me ask you this. If all of you can hear the question, please raise your hands for me. What types of things can we practice on a daily basis to help us in our job search? Chuck, have any ideas? Okay, I think I just lost you. Nikolai, can you give us an idea of what you might want to practice in your job search? You're all being very quiet. I'll go ahead and talk to myself then. As we approach every step of the job search, we've got to look at where we're communicating with people, where we're networking with people, where we're writing to people. Every part of this can be something that we can work on. And thanks, Helen. Yes, of course, interviewing skills as well. So we put it into practice, but we don't practice randomly. If you want to get good at something, when do you practice? Anybody have an answer for that? We practice when we commit to it. Margaret, I've got an answer for, I'm not seeing anything in the chat room. Hi, Margaret.
Hello.
When do we practice?
Continuously.
Continuously? It sounds, can we be a little more specific? I'm going to give you a hint, and that is we need to make a commitment to practice. If you think about it, whenever you've been involved with team sports of any type, you don't randomly practice. We have organized practices. We set times. Even when we work out and we want to do our own personal fitness, we set times and days that we're going to do it, and we commit to it. So the key to this is making a commitment to do the activities that need to get done. Commitment unlocks the doors of imagination, allows vision, and gives us the right stuff to turn our dreams into reality. I think many of us have heard the difference between a resolution and a goal, the timeline and accountability. And the same goes, if you're going to practice, you need to be committed to when it's going to happen, not just hope you'll get around to it. That requires some discipline. We've talked about developing a strategy. It's not simple. I mean, it's very simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. The discipline element tends to throw people. Yes, it means you have to be committed to what you're going to accomplish every day, get up and do it. We need to be motivated. I think this is a tough one. If we're only motivated by money, it gets a little difficult to get up and work this every day. There are other elements that can contribute to our motivation, our satisfaction, our mental health, our well-being. With that, we need to develop a positive attitude. Again, these are all elements that winners possess. People that get what they go after change their attitude. And I like this comment by Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. Don't complain. One of the things that I listen to every day are job seekers complaining about the job market. And many of my clients have gone to job search groups where people talk about all the woes and the elements. And the key to this is if we can look for solutions, if we can change our attitude, look for solutions, we're going to go a lot further. People say they may be lacking in self-confidence. One important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation. And I think many people think that others are born with self-confidence, and it's not necessarily so. Folks really develop self-confidence by trying things, by actually making mistakes and really preparing for what they are planning to get involved with. They're also willing to do what it takes. And I just wonder, how many of you out there are willing to do what it takes? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got some folks who are doing, okay, that doesn't mean run around naked in the middle of a football field. It means respond to announcements within a timely period. It means be available to accept email responses from people. It means get out there. It means to do what you need to do to further your search instead of staying in a passive search. We're going to move from talking about our mindset and the intangibles we develop, or the intangibles that are critical to our success. We're going to move into associated with job search. And I'm sorry, I missed this one. Successful people do what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. I think that's true. Many people tend to be just a little day late, dollar short. These are all things, and when I ask do what it takes, I'm not asking you to sell your firstborn. I think one of the keys to doing what it takes means we get up in the morning, we are available, we are responsive, and oddly, these are all things we have total control over. Even though we don't have control over the job market, we do have control over our attitude and our behavior and what we're going to do about things. And if we sleep in or procrastinate, we're our own worst enemies. These are the things we can control. So let's step into the myths related to job search. Myth 1, I just need a job. I'll figure out what I want to do later. How many of you have had that sensation before? I'm going to ask you to lower your hands and put them back up again. How many of you have just had the notion, I just need to go back to work? Okay, we've got some changes over here. Barry, Tim, Nikolai. Barry, there you go. Ahmad, what has crossed your mind? Can you unmute your phone and maybe we can talk? When you thought you just needed a job and I'll figure out what I want to do later, what were you thinking? What crosses your mind?
Well, you see, if the people is, this is Ahmad, my point is that if you are highly skilled and if you cannot find anything closer to what you need, so I can get something that is, I can actually make some adjustment and get into that job. That's what I try to mean to.
Okay, let me help you with that. I'm glad that you're flexible. I'm glad that you're recognizing something different needs to happen. I'm going to help you with that.
I really appreciate it.
Yes, if we set goals, and I put this up here, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. It sounds like you have a clear direction, and that's very exciting. The key to this is some of us may need to step back a little bit from where we thought we were going to be this year. The economy has dramatically impacted many people's lives all the way around. It means the market is much more competitive. Well, it doesn't mean we give up, and it doesn't mean we end up saying, do you want fries with this? It means we look at the areas that we're most interested in and develop a strategy for moving forward in that direction. So we don't want to end up outside of a strategy that's going to work. It means we want to develop a plan and a path for getting back on track. We establish a goal because it's hard to hit a target you don't have. It means we need to develop connections with people and put some timelines to how we're going to get there. Barry, did you want to add something to the conversation? Whoop, you disappeared there. Okay. And I'm not, is that Mr. Chef or Miss Chef? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, this is Ahmad, yes. I'm sorry. I think I got a point of what he's saying. Yeah, I understand that.
Okay. Okay.
But, I have another issue that I can talk to you down in the road, when you have it more
time.
time.
Okay, we can wait till the end then.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, we can move forward. Myth number 2. Applying to a job board posting is the most effective way to search. Let's raise your hands if you've been applying to job postings. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, so Tom and Matt, how's that working out? Can you type into chat and let us know how that's working out? See if I can find someone with a telephone here. Okay. It looks like about a dozen of you are raising your hands at applying to job boards. I'm going to ask you to put your hands down. I'm going to ask another question. Have the job boards been working for you? Is that a yes? Raise your hand if it's a yes. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. That's what I'm looking at. Art, they've worked for you. Okay, 1 out of about 30 people the job boards have been working for. I think there's a message here, and that would be 85% of all the positions are filled without being publicized. That's called the hidden job market. Many of you may have heard this terminology for the last 30 years. The interesting factor is that 85 percentile does not change. Good market, tight market, it doesn't matter. 85% of all the positions that are out there tend to get filled through word of mouth. Now, what it means is the remaining 15 go to those job boards, go to postings, but out of those, even 5% are typically dedicated to to recruiters, and they might be blind ads, so you really don't know what you're looking for. So the message here is we need to spend more time out meeting people and being clear about what it is we're looking for. We expand our network. We do that, as many of you have, by being members of the IEEE, but by being available and communicating with people that are currently working. We also need to develop what it is we're going to present, because many times it's not what you know, but whom you know. And even though we might know people, we need to let them know what we know and what our value is. In order to do that, we prepare a 30-second introduction. Many of you have heard this called a commercial, an elevator speech. I consider it an introduction because I wouldn't want you selling yourself to someone. It's simply an introduction that would include exactly how you're going to present them with some key points that they can remember about. One of the things that happens when meeting a new person is that we may talk about things that are on our mind as opposed to what we want them to remember. And unfortunately, if we're talking about getting stuck in traffic and we're talking about how our last job ended, that's not going to help move us forward to get a new job. So whatever your 30-second intro includes needs to include the skill sets and the direction or the objective you're trying to achieve so they know exactly who to introduce you to. Myth number 3, I can wing it. Well, I run into people every day who spend probably the first 6 months of their unemployment thinking they'll figure it out on their own and they can wing it. Let me tell you, the more you wing it, the more time you're wasting. Fail to plan, plan to fail. In order to do an effective job search, I'm going to promise you that a clear plan of what it is you need to do, tracking that plan, and committing to that plan is going to get you much closer to where you want to be. And it requires being specific about required activities and tasks, not random. It means we get up in the morning and know exactly what's going to happen. We don't get up in the morning and start figuring it out as the day wears on. How many of you find yourself every day wondering what you should be doing that day? I need you to be honest. How many of you get up and think, I'm just not sure what to do today? Please raise your hands. Okay, the truth comes out. That's not comfortable, is it? The key to this is planning in advance what you need to get done so that when you get up in the morning, it's sitting right there waiting for you. You've got work to do. You know, I have to introduce a concept. I'm going to ask you to lower your hands and raise them again and answer this. How many of you are project managers by trade or actually manage projects in your normal work activities? Please raise your hand. Uh-oh. So you know I have to ask this question. Good night. This is what you do for a living when you're working. It's the same exact concept you need to apply to your job search. We don't randomly approach projects. We set timelines to them. We set accountabilities for them. We follow up with people. Is there anything I've just said that's new to you? Raise your hand. Okay, we have some trailers here that haven't put their hands down, but I'm glad to see. Of course it's not new. In our daily work, it's really important to be specific or things don't get done. So this is why we apply these strategies to our personal situation. Myth number 4, some people are just lucky. How many of you know people you just think they're really, really lucky? Raise your hands. You don't know any lucky, oh, they're a couple. There's someone who doesn't at all. Okay, whoops, we've changed that. Oh, don't know any lucky people. Uh-oh. I don't think I really know any lucky people. I'm going to tell you that what I do know is some people manage to run into circumstances that the timing is good. I'm going to tell you this, that the timing could be great, but you may not be ready for it. How many have seen this before? Raise your hand. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I'm seeing a couple of hands go up. Of course, this is not news. It's what we started off with. Winners prepare in advance. They visualize what they need to see. They prepare their materials. They prepare themselves mentally. They prepare themselves physically to win. What that means is when the opportunity arises, they are ready to roll. I'm going to ask you to drop your hands and answer this honestly. How many of you are truly, really, absolutely ready to take advantage of any opportunity that walks by? Yay, Tom. Okay. That's excellent. Now what we have to do is figure out how to create those opportunities for you. Okay, a couple more folks have said they're totally ready for addressing those opportunities. But I'm seeing the majority of you are not ready. And that goes back to developing a plan and really putting it to work. By the way, one of the reasons we commit and we focus on details is because when something isn't working, we can go back and fix it. If you're randomly doing things and you don't have any tracking method, there's no way to go back to determine what went wrong. And I'm going to ask again, raise your hands if you manage projects at work. Okay, when things get messed up at work, do you just let it go and say, oh, we'll figure out it later? How many of you in managing your projects do a debrief or a review or have some metrics for evaluating what it is that should have happened and didn't happen? Of course you do. So in this regard, we really need to use these same skills for ourselves in our search to ensure that whatever we're doing achieves optimum results. And if it's not working, we have some way of managing exactly what it is we need to get done. So in this, another myth that people assume is it's just a numbers game. If I just keep applying for more positions, I'll eventually get the right job. How many of you have tried that approach? Raise your hand. Just keep sending resume after resume after resume out there. Okay. I'm glad to see not a lot of people have, but some of you have. For those of you that raise your hand, put them down again and let's ask this. How many of you have had success in just sending out dozens and dozens of resumes? Raise your hand.
None.
Did I hear a none? Yes. Okay. So 3 of you have. For those of you that raise your hands with success, I want to find out, did you accept offers? Did any of those lead to offers? Put your hands down and raise them again so we can follow you here. If any of you did send out lots and lots of resumes and got a response, I'd like to see the hands of people that accepted positions. So is this true that 3 of you have? 4? That's not a very good ratio when we're looking at about 40 people right now. I'm glad to see that for some of you it worked. I'm going to recommend that it's just like betting. Every now and again, at some point, you might succeed that way, but there's a much more effective way to go about that. And that's really putting some effort into what you're doing. If you research the company so that you fully understand their place in the industry, you understand their culture, you speak their language, you're willing to do things their way, and you can only know what that means if you know something about them. Have you determined what your true value is to a company? And I'm going to suggest to you that when you send out when you respond to blind ads, you're really at a disadvantage. You don't know who the company is. You don't know what they need. If you wait and reply to postings at the last minute, then know that, I'm going to just use this as an example. If you're using Craigslist, I think we can all agree that unless you respond to a Craigslist posting in 24 hours, you're going to be one of about 9 million people doing so, and it's very unlikely you're going to be considered. If you should be one of the lucky ones and you're watching it at 3 in the morning when something's posted and you respond, the downside is if you don't know who that company is or what language to speak, then you're really not sending information to them that's pertinent to them specifically. And it's still a crapshoot. It's still a guess as to whether or not what you send is going to work. So we need to understand about the companies we're pursuing, and we need to understand the roles we're pursuing. Do you really know what it will take to be competitive, or are you making assumptions? Do you completely understand what the employers need from you? If you don't, then guessing at this is really not an effective tool. It's important to know what is happening from the inside, and there's a way to go about that. And I'm going to also address another element to what you do with this information when you know it. When you know it, actually, we'll be there in just a second. There's one other element that I think is a myth that we think when we're sending in those resumes and we think that somebody else was just smarter or more skilled. How many of you thought, well, I just didn't get there in time, or somebody else had things I didn't have? You applied to some job postings and you never get a response. Raise your hands if you think it's because someone else is more skilled or they're smarter than you. I heard a little sigh. Okay, a few of you are feeling like someone may have outsmarted you or has better skills. I'm going to let you know that probably isn't the case. And the reason that's not the case is because when employers make a hiring decision, they ask 3 questions. Okay. And there we go. My computer froze. Sorry. First of all, they want to know, can you do the job? And, of course, those are the basic skills. Well, hopefully you do understand the skills that are needed, and that's why it's so important to have researched who it is you're responding to so that you know exactly what the position is and what the skills required are. That's kind of a no-brainer, and that should show up in your resume. The other element to that is, will you do the job? Now, I'm going to ask you to lower your hands and raise them again. How many of you are actually pursuing positions that might be considered beneath you? They might be things that you have gone backwards in time in your own mind. I'm seeing 3. Any other folks that are, yep. So we have some people that are applying for things that are less than what they last did. Okay. So let me promise you something. They're going to look at your resume, and you can always adjust your resume to dummy it down and apply, but when you show up in person, your attitude needs to reflect that whatever role you're interviewing for, you're excited about, that you understand your value to them and are glad to be in that role and are glad to work forward from it. If you come in with a chip on your shoulder, or you've not dummied down your resume and they've called you anyway, you can guarantee that the first thing they're going to say is, gosh, why would you be interested in this role? It seems like you're overqualified. So I'm going to ask you to lower your hands, and I'm going to ask you this. How many of you have been told in an interview that you are overqualified? Let's see your hands. Okay, we're starting to get a few. Okay, it looks like about a half dozen of you have. There is a way to overcome that. It's to become the best qualified. One of the third element of this series for what or the package that employers are looking for is, do you fit? And if you have not investigated their company culture or have a sense about who actually works there, you can't know that until you get there. So I'm going to suggest a couple of things. The can you should be addressed in your resume. The will you is your attitude, and it needs to be addressed before you ever go in. The do you fit is something you need to research through other people to understand their culture, to understand their mindset, to understand their tempo. Because I'm going to promise you that when people are brilliant but don't get along with people they work with, they don't last. And here's an example. How many of you have heard of Terrell Owens? Raise your hands. Okay, a few are coming through right now. Okay, wide receiver. Talented, hugely talented person. But imagine this. He's been fired 3 times. He's been fired 3 times because he doesn't get along with people. He's a troublemaker. So no matter how talented he is, there's still an issue with how he fits with the team, and ultimately they can't put up with it, and out he goes. I understand he was just signed again earlier this week. We'll have to put a time frame on that. But if you're a Terrell Williams, if you're one of the smartest and the best and the most talented but can't get along with people, understand how that's impacting your work today. Myth number 7, a resume is just to get a foot in the door. Raise your hands if you ascribe to that theory. How many of you believe a resume is just to get your foot in the door? Few of you, there we go. Yeah, well, guess what? That went out in the 80s. And for many of you that were around in the 80s, it was a tough time in the early 80s, tough time in the early 70s, tough time in the early 80s. Many of us interviewed for roles that we didn't quite know, but we figured, oh, well, after I get in there, I'll figure it out later. I'm going to promise you that's not going to happen in today's market. But further, there's another reason why you don't want to just have a cute resume, why it's so important to actually put some thought into your resume. And that's because a well-crafted, tailored resume is one of your best forms of preparation for the interview. By clearly understanding what an employer needs and fully understanding the role that you're interviewing for, or excuse me, that you're pursuing, by including that in your resume and using examples of your work to fully illustrate your value, you're actually preparing yourself for the interview. So by investing that time up front, you have come much further down the road so that when you're actually in the interview process, you're going to be better prepared for answering questions. And you're going to have a cheat sheet right in front of you. That resume is going to serve you better than just getting your foot in the door. So please know this. Even if you get your foot in the door, if you've not prepared for that interview, it's not going to lead to an offer. Myth number 8. Your titles, degrees, and awards will impress the employer. You think? How many of you have been under the impression that the more degrees, the more certificates you have, the more it's going to impress employers? Raise your hand. Everybody's quiet on that one. I'm glad to hear that, because you know what? It isn't what you're called, it's what you offer. And in sending a resume, it's so important to present the benefits of hiring you, not features. And by saying features, that's what I'm indicating. When you talk about degrees and certificates and titles, there are things that you were called or labeled with or achieved, but without defining exactly what it was for by qualifying and quantifying it, they really have no understanding of your value, and that's what we're really going for, is to be able to present your value to them. So forget what you're called and talk about what you do. So another element that we can add back to the overqualified issue, and that is if you've had a title that is beyond what you're applying for, then just change it. Clearly, if the scope of your work matches what they're asking for, we don't care what you're called. Give them the scope of work that fits what they need, that shows that you're competent, that shows that you have the experience in it. And don't talk over the role you're going after. Again, focus on accomplishments that fit what they need. Myth number 9. Other people are simply more comfortable talking about themselves, so they do better in interviews. How many of you think that's true? Raise your hands if you think that's true, that other people are just more comfortable talking to other people. I think you're all going to sleep on me out there. There you are. Oh. It's often a common assumption that because people do well in interviews, it's because they're more comfortable talking. And it's not necessarily so. Shy people can do very, very well in interviews, and it comes back to practicing. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can learn to do it well. That means if we're struggling through interviews because we can't think of what to say on the spot, then we simply write out our answers to questions in advance and we practice them. Let me find this out. Raise your hand if you're shy. No shy people here. Okay. Okay, Coral, are you going to be shy and not talk to me? Can you unmute your phone and talk to me? Nope. Let's try this. I'm going to type Coral a note. Are you online now, Coral? Nope, that was Helen. Okay. I guess she's that shy she's not talking to us. Okay, I'm gonna make up something then. Most of the people I deal with that are shy believe that there's some talent to being extemporaneous. And the reality is, if you're an introvert or if you're shy, and they're two separate things, it's all about planning ahead so that you're prepared at that moment. And I'm going to confess something to you. I'm actually an introvert. Even though the work I do is with people in front of audiences all the time, most of the time I'm up in my head. And that means when I'm in a large group of people and have to randomly come up with conversation, I may not be interested in doing that or ready. And it means I have to set my objectives in advance to know exactly what I'm going to say. And I'm going to suggest that for an interview, it's the same process. That if, in fact, you get in your head what it is that's going to be expected of you, you'll prepare in advance, and you'll be able to address their questions because you practiced them. Myth number 10. I can use the interview to determine whether I want the job or not. I've actually had people in the last 2 weeks tell me they were going to go to the interview because it was just as much about interviewing the employer. How many of you have used that thinking in the last few months? And of those of you that have used that thinking, I just want to find out, let's try this. Have you gotten an offer from an employer? Well, there it is. My point? The interview is not to get the job. It's to get the job offer. And if you're sitting in front of an employer evaluating what they're saying and thinking in front of them, or consciously asking questions that are about what you want and need as opposed to posing them in an open-ended manner to allow them to talk, I'm going to promise you that their interpretation of what you're asking is that you are less than enthusiastic and less than interested. If you are asking open-ended questions about the work, about the company, and allow them to talk, 9 times out of 10 they're going to tell you the other stuff you want to know. If you start asking about money and about benefits in an interview, you're already shot in the foot. That's not something that you should be bringing up. So the key to this, and I hope you get it, is not to get the job, it's to get the offer. Because you know what? You can't turn down something that's not been presented. And I have to tell you, the best fun ever is being able to turn down an offer because you can. Can't turn down an offer if it's not in front of you. Myth 11. Employers are interested in your opinions. How many of you have been on been on interviews where they ask you questions like, please tell me what you think about, or please tell me how you feel about. Raise your hand if you've been asked those theoretical kinds of questions. How many of you have not? Okay, there you go. Okay, so do you really think they care? I'm going to share something with you. They don't. You know why? They interpret whatever you say you think and whatever they say you feel. They interpret from their mindset and what they need. Let me see a raise of hands. How many of you think it's great to have someone interpret what you say as opposed to listening to what you mean? Raise your hands. Okay, nobody did. Understandable. Employers don't care about what you think. They care about what you will do, and that is why they interpret. When you answer those questions, they say, well, this might mean this, and this might mean that. We don't want them interpreting us. We want them to understand exactly what we mean. And so in that case, we need to give examples. So when someone says, tell me what you think, how do you feel about this, what you can say is, in the past, I've dealt with it this way. In the past, I've experienced that, so this is what I've done. Myth number 12. They know you want the job because you applied. Well, sure. How many of you would think any other thing? You go to an interview, of course they're going to expect that you want the job. How many of you think that's true? Raise your hands. Well, guess what, Joseph? There are a few more of you. There you go. Guess what? It's not so. You know why? The same. When I talked to you a little bit ago about wanting to get the offer, not the job. If you sit in front of somebody and your face is presenting a quizzical kind of expression, or you're concentrating on whatever they're saying and you're not being responsive, and then you leave there without asking for the job, they're interpreting that. They're believing that that means you're not interested. So what do we have to do about it? Ask them for the job. Ask for the position. Ask them for what the next steps are. Act interested. Nod your head as they're talking. Let them know you're excited about it. And for many of you, if you're interviewing for roles that are, again, that you might be considered overqualified for, you need to show them that level of excitement. You need to fully and absolutely address the fact that you want that role. Myth 13. You didn't get the offer because somebody else was smarter or more talented. You know, we've talked about that before, that somebody didn't look at your resume because you thought they had skills you didn't have. Let's find out. There are many reasons why people don't get hired, and I have to tell you, I read things every day that it's why I did this presentation. I know it's simplistic, but I have to tell you, when I watch why people don't go to work, it typically isn't about the fact that there's a tight market, so they're not valued. Yes, there's a tight market, so there are more people applying, but it means the people who just thought they were going to get away with a wing and a prayer are not succeeding. And why? Because they haven't invested the time to change some of these very simple things. I mentioned earlier, if you start asking questions about money during an interview, shame on you, you're going to be passed over. If you are not prepared and you don't seem confident, you lack poise, they're going to interpret that as a lack of confidence and then interpret that as maybe you're not going to perform well in this position. If you go into an interview in today's market and do not know something about that company, they will dismiss you immediately. Years ago, we did not have the benefit of the Internet. In today's market, it's absolutely unacceptable to go into an employer and not know as much as you possibly can about them. And that would be by researching their website completely, news articles, going through LinkedIn to find people that are employed there. There are many ways to find out the inside scoop and act like you're interested. So how many of you look at this list and recognize, go ahead and raise your hands, recognize some things that maybe you could have improved on to make a better impression with an employer? Let's see you raise a hand. Oh, someone said maybe, maybe not. Okay. Only a couple of you. How many of you do you think are in denial right now? I've been doing this for a long time. When I say doing this, I was in staffing before I became a career coach. So I interviewed hundreds of people every week. And I have to tell you, many people think they're being enthusiastic, think they're being courteous, think they're prepared, and they're not even close. And it's sad. The key to developing these areas is really being honest with yourself and being willing to have somebody work with you to show you some areas that might need improvement. And I'm going to recommend that it's not a spouse, because your spouses are going to tell you you're lovely, wonderful, charming, terrific. We need somebody that's objective, that's going to be totally removed from the emotion that's related to any of this, but really tell you if you don't seem enthusiastic. Okay, myth 14. Employers always lowball their offers. How many of you believe in this market that employers will lowball you automatically without thinking? Raise your hands. Okay. Well, guess what? No, they don't. And I'll tell you why. Some reason it's not going. There we go. Okay. Employers aren't lowballing. What employers are doing is offering competitive rates. And if you've not investigated what a competitive market rate is today versus last week versus last month versus 6 months ago, then that's why you're thinking they're lowballing you. But I'm going to promise you, most employers, most recruiters, most HR people are doing twice as much work right now with less assistance and in less time. It means that they have fewer resources. They are not going to go through an entire interview process just to lowball you to see what happens. Absolutely not. What they have been doing is keeping abreast with their peers, with other people in the industry that can provide them with information on what is competitive at this point. And you know what? Reality is, for many, many positions, salaries have declined. That does not mean all. It just means many and some. And you need to know if that is if you fall into that bracket or not. I would suggest that some salaries are down 20% from just a year ago. That may seem shocking to some people, but that's not lowballing. That's being competitive for today's market. So you really need to be aware of current conditions and how wages are impacted, and then do something about adjusting your lifestyle to deal with it, because I'll promise you, if someone offers you something lower than what you had anticipated and you hadn't researched to know that, then you're likely to turn it down and stay unemployed another 8 months. And you do the math. If you're giving up your salary for another 8 months, so you're getting nothing over that entire period, instead of accepting a lower salary for right now, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're giving up money that's on the table. Additionally, if you are in the market today working, then in 2 years when the economy turns around and life gets better again, you're going to have positioned yourself to be first in line, whereas other people that stayed unemployed are still at the back of the line. So waiting until wages goes up is not a helpful strategy. Asking for decidedly more money may result in the offer being rescinded. Simple as that. Seen it happen many, many times. Myth 15. None of this applies to me because I already have an offer on the table. How many of you have an offer on the table right this minute? Raise your hands. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands here. Oops. Okay, then just know that, oh, Joe, you do. Joseph, you do. Excellent. Keep this in mind. Nothing lasts forever. In our current world, the average worker will change careers on average 3 to 6 times. Well, if we change careers 3 to 6 times, you can imagine how many jobs within each career we might hold. It means that the days of spending 10 years at a company are probably over for most of us. And it means that no matter what you have on the table right now, in 2 years, if the market improves and things get different, you're going to be looking at some other options. And I'm hoping that some of these strategies will help you apply, or that you will apply some of these strategies and they'll help you succeed with the next rung of the ladder here. So the summary here is to change your old strategies. If things aren't working, things need to change. Plan your time every day and work your plan every day. That means know what you need to do before you get started in the morning. Work your plan. That doesn't mean you don't adjust. Clearly, you're going to have to adjust based on when you get called for interviews, based on other things that occur, but it means you develop or you incorporate that into your plan for the next day or the next day as opposed to just leaving it on a to-do list. Pay attention to details, dates, instructions. I'm shocked at how many people do not follow simple directions when applying for positions. I'm on about 1,000 different lists, and I'm more than happy to connect workers with employers that have positions. I also often forward something that says, I am only the messenger. Please contact this person. You can bet at least 6 people each time contact me directly thinking I'm the employer. So please pay attention to details. Get out and talk with people. Build your exposure. If you're not actively involved with professional associations, I'm not recommending you join all of them. Just go test them out. Go to their events, talk to their membership committee, and ask if you can visit once and listen to a speaker that they present, or get involved with one of their other activities. Work on their boards. Get visible within the organization so people know what you have to offer. The other issue that we all suffer is that when you apply to job boards, you are forced to deal with human resources. It's very unlikely that if there is an announcement posted that those resumes go to the hiring manager. What happens when you go to a human resource department is they're unclear about what the role really requires. Yes, they may screen for keywords, but they may not understand context at all. You need to get to the decision makers. Get out and talk to people and get introduced to decision makers. Take some risks. I like this because you have nothing to lose in the market we're dealing with. You have absolutely nothing to lose. Unless you walk out into the unknown, the odds of making a profound difference in your life are pretty low. The next concept, getting started. Establish some goals. Set timelines. Identify barriers that are holding you back and fix them. Make a commitment to getting things done and establish a daily routine. Make sure that you are not just doing busy work, but that you're tracking your work and that you're seeing if it's effective. If it's not working, fix it. I'd be interested to know what behaviors you're willing to change to win at this game. I'm hoping some of this information helped you get closer to your dreams. If you do have questions for me, I'll be staying online and we'll be glad to field some by telephone if you'd like to ask. Thanks very much all for your attention today. I hope this was helpful. Thank you, Helen.
Eddie, this is Ahmad. Can I ask you one question?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I mentioned to you in the beginning of the presentation, I just missed a little bit of it. There's an interesting point that you raised in the meeting that avoid the human resources.
Yeah.
I agree 100% with you on that because every suggestion that comes online that goes through human resources, you never get a response. Okay. Now, identify some company that I know they're doing the work like I've been doing for a long time.
Okay.
Pretty close because I did call one company and talk to the human resources person, okay? I applied, and at that time they said they did not have any opening, and that's not a good fit. But I saw they're keeping an ad on the online and everywhere. I see the same ad coming up. So I called again, and I said, they said, yeah, you have a resume on file, but we still don't have on fit. But I know they're pretty sure I have 90% of the requirement needed to get the job. Now, I don't know how I can pass the HR and get in contact with the person.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions. Do you know any other person that works there?
No, that's the problem. That's the thing I was going to ask you how I'm going to do it.
So let me ask you a few questions, and then I'll let you respond. Are you on LinkedIn right now?
I'm in LinkedIn. That's correct.
Okay. Have you done a search on LinkedIn for that company name to see if anybody pops up?
I did, and I identified 2 persons, but I don't think anybody is within that network that I can connect him to.
Okay, so have you called the company and simply asked for them? Remember I said take risks? This is where you get bold. You develop a script so you don't sound like an idiot when you call. You introduce yourself. You call them up and say, hey, I'm really interested in your company, and I'm interested in learning some more about it. Now, this is not when you ask for a job. Don't ask for a job because they won't talk with you. Tell them you're interested in the company and interested in learning more about it. You could also say, here's my field of interest. Is it possible for you to connect me with the manager of that department, or do you know a person that works in that department that could tell me a little more about it? I'm going to promise you, if you ask about a position, they're not going to talk to you.
Are you talking about the human resources or any person?
No, you don't talk to human resources. No. You just look on LinkedIn, find the names of someone who works there, call the company directly, and ask for that person.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
They're both. Ask for them.
Okay.
But you need to have it scripted, and you can't be asking for a job. Are we clear on that?
Okay, I got it.
Job.
Thank
you.
you.
Not ask for the job. You need to reference the job.
Okay, very good. Okay, thanks a lot.
That's how you break.
Sherry, how can that work?
How can that work?
I mean, you're saying you're saying look up people that you don't know.
Yep.
So introduce yourself as a stranger and say, I'm not interested in finding a job. I just want to find out about your company.
Okay, so
and then they're
the language you use is very important. And we don't get interested in finding out about a job because that's not accurate. So your semantics are very important. You say from the beginning, I'm very, very interested in learning more about your company. My field of interest is in this. I see that you're in this department, because you need to know something about them. You found that on LinkedIn. I see that you're in this. Would you mind spending just a few minutes by telephone to answer a few questions about, and this is why you prepare your questions in advance. What do you want to know? Do you want to know about some technology they're using or new program they've developed, or would you be willing to connect me with someone in this department who could tell me a little more about, and it's, again, you have to fine-tune what it is you're going to ask. It's called cold calling, and we do it in sales all the time. The point is, in this case, we never call somebody when we're cold calling to sell a product to say, hey, I want to sell your company a copier. Who do I talk to? Because they'll hang up on you. So you don't say, oh, I really want a job, so that's why I'm calling. You ask about them or the interest in the company. Now, I'm going to give you an alternative. The other thing is to learn from your networks. If the professional networks that you're involved with or in professional associations, if there is a member that is already working in that company, then you've got a warm lead instead of a cold lead. And when you can say, how does it happen? Well, it isn't going to happen if you don't try it. Simple as that. And it's the same strategy that salespeople use when they have to break through. And the key is you don't sell, you don't market, you ask about them, and people are much more forgiving. What other area? What part of the country are you in, by the way?
Where am I? I'm in the Chicago area.
Okay. Do you have a regional business journal?
A regional business journal?
Yeah, a weekly paper that talks about industry in your area.
Probably.
Yeah, check into that. I'm from Seattle. We have the Puget Sound Business Journal. It covers all of Western Washington. In that journal, every week there are millions of companies listed. They talk about who they bought out, who they merged with, what new invention they have, where they're getting money. There's always something published. And if you do some searching and find articles of that nature, then to follow up on that is totally natural and acceptable. It shows a level of interest. So that's why I'm saying you need to dig into it a little more to determine what would you possibly ask that would indicate you're really interested. And I'm going to promise you again, if you're all about just the job, no one's going to talk to you. It's kind of like if somebody is calling you, a telemarketer calls you and tries to sell you a product, what do? We hang up on them.
Yep.
Or we say, send me a brochure. And what do we do with the brochure? We throw it out. So don't send resumes. Don't ask about a job. Genuinely ask and ask for 5 minutes of their time or 10 minutes of their time to ask very specific things about their company. once again, yes, it's a lot easier if you have a warm lead. Yes, it's a lot easier if you can reference something about them. Maybe you discovered the person you came across has a patent, something, anything that is related to the work you do that would cue them that you know what they do and understand them. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, Sherry, this is Ahmad again. One more thing. If you want to do the approach for the networking through email, this is the concept you use it pretty much. How do you approach that person from unknown people? Like you do have their email somehow from LinkedIn or somewhere.
Well, that's exactly how. And I'd want to talk to you. It's kind of a longer process because a lot of scripting is involved when you use email. Keep in mind, email is different than a phone call. And so what you write is very, very important. The questions you ask have to be very, very succinct and something they can offer. And the other key is writing it in a way to engage them so that they'll be willing to answer. That means you can't ask 57 questions. You ask 2 that they can offer. And yes, it's absolutely possible to connect with people by email. And the only reason, by the way, that I suggested the telephone is if you did not have access to the email. My suggestion is anytime you can use email instead of the phone, do that because the phone's an interruption. And if you can avoid interrupting them by just sending an email and asking something specific, most people are pretty happy to help.
Exactly. Now, the title that I put it, like the subject line, I put follow-ups. I don't know if it's the right word to use.
Well, follow-up, if they don't know who the heck you are, then they know that's BS right to begin with.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you have to think about it. If I don't know this person, I need to send something that's going to engage them in a way that's real and not bait and switch. So once again, I would need to know who, what, where. It's a longer process, and that's what I work with my clients to do, to help them script things that are effective so that they do get replies.
I see. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have a question?
Sherry?
Yeah.
In my industry, there's a very quiet and subtle bias against older workers. How do you get around that?
I'm sorry for laughing. I'd say, and what industry are you in?
In the software industry.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you that it's all in how you act. 2 things, and we have control over this. If you go to work for a startup company that's filled with 25-year-olds riding skateboards to work, guess what?
Learn to ride a skateboard.
Well, I think I wouldn't go there, because I don't know about you. I'd hurt myself pretty badly, and I can't risk that. My point is, when I talked about the culture and knowing if you fit, guess what? Some of us just don't fit those places anymore. Doesn't mean we're not employable, doesn't mean there aren't other places, but not every single one of them is filled with 25-year-olds. It's up to you to do the research to find who are going to be more age-friendly. Now, there's another flip side to this. Some startups have recognized we've got all this talent, but we don't have maturity. And because of the lack of maturity, we're not doing really well. We really need somebody who's been around the block. So in that case, you're going to be valued, but it's how you show up. If you're slunking in the room and you have droopy shoulders, or your presence brings them to look at your age first, then guess what? That's what they're going to see. That's the interpretation. So there are 2 messages. One is liven yourself up so that the energy you have is exhibited so they can see it. And the second is make sure that you're targeting companies where you're going to be happy. I'm just going to ask you a question. Did you see my picture at the beginning?
Yes.
Did I look old to you?
No.
You don't think?
No.
You don't? Well, I'm going to share this in broadcast and everything. I'll be 54 this year. Someone would say that's old. I'm going to tell you, I don't put myself in a position anymore where I look old. And when I say look old, I mean that I've done too much physically, so I'm worn out at the end of the day and look like it, or that I have to climb 8,000 stairs to get somewhere because I might not be able to do that 7 times a day. The reality is I am older than I was 10 years ago. I may not look dramatically older, but I feel a little older, and I have to make sure that I'm at my best every day in respect to the nature of the work that's expected of me. And that's the key, is I take on what I can do, and I schedule my time so that I'm not killing myself, so that I can present my best self. And you know what? I deal with kids. I deal with 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and nobody walks up and says, oh, you're old. It's really about our attitude and our energy and where we're putting ourselves so that we're in places where we're working with people that we're going to get along with. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so one last thing. Quit talking about stuff from 8,000 years ago on your resume, and when you show up in an interview, if you've cut it off your resume, then don't talk about it. I've edited resumes, so we cut off about 15 years for people, and then in the middle of a conversation, they go back to something that was 1,000 years ago and irrelevant and bust themselves just like that. So be consistent. Talk about what's relevant to them, and they'll be interested. Okay, any other questions?
Hey, this is Ahmad again, one more time.
Hi.
Okay, in terms of a resume, how far back you want to go on professional experience, like 10 years?
What's your industry?
I'm in electrical engineering. I'm a chip designer. I should design a computer chips and all this stuff.
So, you know what? It depends on the company, and it depends on the level you're applying for. 10 years is a nice number, but in some cases there are more conservative companies that value longer employment, and it also depends on where your employment breaks. For instance, if you were working for a company from 1992 to 2002, you have to put the whole thing. You can't just put part of it. You just put it and move on.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, but I was in teaching before I got in the industry, so I had a lot of research experience.
Well, but
Because
you have to decide, is that relevant to the role you're applying for? If it's not, then you're overkilling it, and they don't want to talk to you.
Oh, I see. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Hey, anyone else? Okay, I guess we're quiet. Helen, I guess we're done today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Very
Sharon.
much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Helen, for all your help.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.